One metal box quietly reshaped the entire planet. Not a smartphone, not the internet, not even the airplane. A steel container, plain, ugly, and easy to ignore, changed how food, clothes, cars, electronics, and raw materials move across the earth. It helped build modern globalization, transformed entire cities, rewired factories, crushed old industries, and made it possible for a product designed in one country, assembled in another, and sold almost everywhere to arrive cheaply enough that most people never question how it got there. And that is the real story here. Shipping containers did not just make trade faster, they changed what the world could become. Before the container, global trade was slow, messy, expensive, and strangely fragile. Cargo moved in what was called break bulk shipping. That meant goods were loaded piece by piece. Crates of fruit, barrels of chemicals, bags of coffee, rolls of fabric, boxes of machine parts. Everything had to be carried, lifted, counted, stacked, and secured by hand, often by large teams of dock workers working for hours or even days. Picture a busy port in the old days, and it looks almost chaotic. Men with hooks and ropes, forklifts squeezing between piles of random cargo, warehouses packed with goods waiting to be sorted. Ships stuck at the dock while crews loaded thousands of unrelated items into awkward spaces one at a time. Every transfer created another chance for delay, damage, theft, or confusion. Most people never think about this part. The ocean crossing was not always the biggest problem. Sometimes loading and unloading cost more than the voyage itself. A ship could spend more time sitting in port than moving across the sea. If you wanted to trade internationally, you needed patience, labor, paperwork, and money to absorb constant inefficiency. That made global trade possible, but not truly seamless. It was a world where distance still fought back. Then came the container. The basic idea sounds almost too simple. Put cargo into a strong, standardized box. Seal it. Move that same box by truck, train, and ship without unpacking and repacking the goods inside every step of the way. That is it. And yet that one idea solved a ridiculous number of problems at once. Instead of loading thousands of separate items onto a ship, ports could load containers like giant building blocks. Instead of exposing cargo to weather, theft, and repeated handling, goods stayed sealed from origin to destination. Instead of custom arrangements every time, transport companies could design vehicles, cranes, ships, storage yards, and schedules around a single standard. That sounds simple, until you see what happens next. Standardization is one of the most powerful forces in modern life. It is not flashy, but once everyone agrees on a common size and system, everything around it starts changing. Factories adapt, ports rebuild, trucks get redesigned, rail networks shift, software improves, warehouses reorganize. Investors pour money in because the new system is finally predictable enough to scale, and scale is where the container became world-changing. A container can be moved by a crane in minutes. It can be stacked high in a shipyard, loaded onto trains in long lines, and transferred to trucks with much less manual sorting. Ports that once needed armies of labor could move vastly more cargo with fewer hands and more machinery. The cost of moving goods dropped dramatically. The speed improved, reliability improved, planning improved. Once that happened, companies began rethinking the entire geography of production. Before containers, manufacturing often had to stay relatively close to the market. Shipping complicated products long distances was too expensive or too risky. But when transport became cheaper and more dependable, businesses could break production into stages and place each stage wherever it made the most economic sense. Now a product did not have to be born in one place. Its raw materials could come from one country, components from three more, assembly from another, packaging from somewhere else. Then it could be shipped to distribution centers thousands of miles away, and still arrive at a price ordinary people would accept. And this is where the whole system changes. The container did not just help trade, it helped create the global supply chain itself. Suddenly, companies could chase cheaper labor, specialized expertise, lower land costs, favorable taxes, or access to specific raw materials. A shoe company could source rubber here, fabric there, and assemble everything in another region built around export manufacturing. An electronics company could spread supplies across continents. Retailers could fill giant warehouses with imported goods and restock stores with astonishing speed. This made many products cheaper, sometimes much cheaper. It helped fuel the rise of mass consumer culture, especially in countries that imported huge volumes of manufactured goods. Store shelves became fuller. Variety exploded. Seasonal inventories changed faster. Businesses that mastered logistics gained enormous power. But here is the weird part. The shipping container also changed places you would never expect. Ports had to transform physically. Old city center docks, built for breakbulk cargo and labor-heavy loading, often became obsolete. Container ports needed vast flat land, giant cranes, deep water, truck access, rail links, and huge storage yards. that pushed many ports outward, away from cramped old waterfronts. Entire waterfront economies changed. Some dockworker communities shrank. Industrial neighborhoods declined. New logistics corridors rose elsewhere. Cities were reshaped by a box. Labor was reshaped too. Traditional dock work, once brutal, crowded, and heavily dependent on manual handling, began to disappear in many places. Containerization improved efficiency, but it also eliminated large numbers of jobs tied to old port systems. That sparked labor battles, political fights, and deep social change. For some, the container meant progress. For others, it meant being pushed out by machinery and a new economic order that would already be complicated enough, but it gets bigger. Once container shipping reached full scale, ships themselves began to grow. If your whole business is based on moving standardized boxes as cheaply as possible, the logic is obvious. Build larger ships that carry more containers in one voyage. Spread the operating costs across more cargo. Lower the cost per unit even further. So the vessels became monsters. Modern container ships are not just large. They are floating industrial systems, massive engines, sophisticated navigation, stacked towers of steel boxes, precise weight distribution, tight schedules, carefully planned routes connecting major hubs around the world. One delay can ripple through ports, trains, warehouses, trucking networks, and store inventories thousands of miles away. And that reveals another hidden truth. Containers made trade more efficient, but they also made the world more interconnected and more vulnerable. When everything runs smoothly, the system feels invisible. You click buy, a product appears. Shelves stay stocked. Factories keep humming. Food, furniture, tools, and electronics move as if by magic. But it is not magic. It is synchronization. Ports must have space. Cranes must work. Chassis must be available. Trains must connect. Truck drivers must show up. Warehouses must receive shipments. Customs systems must process paperwork. Containers must be in the right place at the right time. Shipping lines must maintain schedules. Manufacturers must forecast demand months in advance. This next step is where things get interesting. Because once the world depended on containers, even small disruptions could create huge chain reactions. A strike at a port, a storm in a shipping lane, a shortage of truck drivers, a surge in consumer demand, a factory shutdown, a blocked canal, congestion at terminals. Suddenly containers pile up in one region and go missing in another. Ships wait offshore. Warehouses overflow. Retailers run short. Prices rise. Production schedules collapse because one missing component does not arrive on time. The box that made globalization efficient also made the system tightly coupled. It reduced friction, but it also reduced slack. Most people only notice global logistics when it breaks. And when it breaks, you realize how much of everyday life depends on those boxes. Not just TVs and sneakers, medical supplies, machinery parts, auto components, appliances, packaging materials, construction goods, even the equipment used to produce other equipment. Modern life runs through container terminals whether people see them or not. There is another twist here. The container did not only help rich countries import more stuff, it also helped manufacturing powerhouses rise. Countries that built strong port infrastructure, export zones, roads, rail, and industrial clusters could plug directly into global trade. If you could load containers efficiently and reliably, you could become part of the world economy at a much larger scale. That helped some regions industrialize faster, attract investment, and become central to global production networks. In other words, the container moved power. It shifted which cities mattered, which ports mattered, which countries became factories to the world, and which businesses could dominate by mastering logistics instead of just making a good product. In many industries, supply chain design became as important as engineering or marketing. The companies that understood movement won, and yet the container itself still looks absurdly ordinary. A steel rectangle, corrugated walls, corner castings, locking doors, serial numbers. Nothing about it screams revolution. No dramatic shape, no futuristic glamour. It looks more like a storage unit than a world-changing invention. But that is usually how the biggest systems changes happen. Not through dramatic objects people admire, but through boring standards everyone quietly adopts. The barcode changed retail. The pallet changed warehouses. The shipping container changed the planet. Because once the box became standard, the world could be reorganized around it. Ports, ships, factories, trucks, trade agreements, warehouse software, Inland rail hubs, retail supply chains, and consumer expectations all started leaning on the same invisible promise. Put goods in the box here, open the box there, and trust the system in between. That trust built modern trade. Of course, the story is not purely heroic. Containerization helped make products cheaper, but it also encouraged longer supply chains, harder to see labor conditions, intense competition, and a level of global dependence that can become risky. It made abundance possible, but also made overconsumption easier. It connected the world, but not always fairly. Some places boomed, others were hollowed out. So the container did not simply create a better world, it created a different one. A world where distance shrank, a world where specialization exploded, a world where convenience became normal, a world where entire economies depend on the movement of anonymous steel boxes across oceans most people never see. And that is the final payoff. The shipping container changed the world because it did something deeper than move cargo. It turned trade into a system that could scale across the whole planet. It made global production modular, predictable, and cheap enough to become ordinary. It allowed modern globalization to stop being a theory and become infrastructure. One metal box quietly reshaped cities, jobs, prices, factories, and daily life. And chances are, almost everything around you has ridden inside one. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more stories about the hidden systems that keep the world running.